On today's show, the Hawks fall at home to the Thunder, and they hand out a 10-day contract to Kevon Harris. We'll get into all of that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1920 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening here at the end of February into March. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, get $150 in terms of dollars in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Please check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. We are on Apple. We are on Spotify. We're also on YouTube. Please like this video as you are watching it on that platform. And please do us a favor and spread the word about the podcast to your friends and family that have interest in the Atlanta Hawks. And today's show will be diving into what became a 135-119 loss for the Hawks at the hands of the Oklahoma City Thunder in this game. Their second straight loss. The Hawks now fall to 27-33 on the year. And certainly the losses have piled up a little bit in recent days for Atlanta. They've lost 5 of 6 now, wrapped around the All-Star break. Although most of them were in close-fought fashion, this one was not particularly close all the way through. We'll get into all the context as you might expect on the show. If you're a new listener, what we do on these game breakdowns kind of give you the whole picture and then also get a little bit granular in the weeds, stats, analysis, observations, etc. And broadly speaking, what I would say is this is a loss that was kind of expected on some level. The Hawks also had some nice moments in this game. They had a very bad start, which we'll talk about later on, and dug themselves a hole. That was a message post-game from Quinn, from the players. Everyone kind of noted that slow start. It was kind of what they could not afford to do against this Thunder team. And then they had some high highs, a good second quarter. They had some low lows for sure in this game. And overall, the result was, not unexpected. Again, I will say that. The Hawks were big underdogs in this one. The Thunder are now 48-11. And currently, this is a crazy stat in some respects. The Thunder have the best net rating, so basically their point differential, in about 30 years of the NBA. They are really, really, really good. And as such, they were 12.5-point favorites in this game, according to our friends at FanDuel. Now, obviously that's a big number, and the Hawks could have covered it for sure. But at the same time, losing this game is not great. The Hawks had some bad moments that we'll talk about. But I do have a hard time getting terribly worked up about this one. It was much more frustrating, honestly, if you want to just compare the last couple of games. I think the Miami Heat loss on Wednesday that I covered in depth on this podcast was a much, much worse result than this one was, not only because the margin was bigger, but because that was a much more winnable game on paper than this one was. But anyway, we're going to kind of all this happen now. And I do have two stats that I would say tell a broad story of the game. They don't explain the entire thing. That's what the rest of the podcast is for. But two stats that I would say, if you just told me these two things, if you did not watch this game at all and just said, all right, this happened and this happened, I would say, all right, the Hawks lost by a lot of points, probably. And here they are. The Thunder hit 23 threes in this game. When you are already facing a team that is better than you, and the Thunder are better than the Hawks, very obviously, and that's not controversial, I wouldn't hope if you listen to this podcast. When that happens and you allow 23 threes, you are in trouble. That's the simple math of that. That's basically the math of the NBA. If you allow 23 threes to anyone, you're probably in some trouble, especially against a team like Oklahoma City. That's an elite defensive team. On top of that, that's a bad number. Then the second one is turnover margin. So if you listen to the show on Thursday evening, I did a mailbag show that's still, by the way, very relevant right now. The only thing that's not would be the end of the podcast talking about the Thunder preview. But in the meantime, that show discussed the turnover margin and how that was going to be a kind of a key for the Hawks. The Thunder are great at causing turnovers defensively and also preventing them on offense. They're awesome in turnover margin this year. And the Hawks had 7 more turnovers than the Thunder. So the two stats, again, 23 threes allowed and 7 more turnovers in the game. Put those things together and you're basically dead. Like, I'm not saying that it would have been absolutely impossible to win with those two things, but it would have been virtually impossible in my opinion. And there you go. So beyond those two stats, and again, there is more to get into. It wasn't just those two things, but the Hawks lost this game defensively. The Thunder are an incredibly good defensive team. They're number one in the league defense by a lot. They're good on offense. They're not uber elite on offense. But in this game, it was the Hawks defense that let them down more than their offense, I thought. They ended up with a 125 defensive rating in this game, which is bad. under any circumstances, basically. It was well over 130 until the fourth quarter when the game slowed down. It was garbage time in the fourth quarter, etc. I would say it was pretty rough. And look, the Thunder were not incredible inside the arc, but as I mentioned before, they hit 23 threes on 50 attempts. That's their second most threes of the season. Now, this is not popular. People get mad at me when I do this, but I've just now watched. I've watched the entire game as I always do. I always do a rewatch before I do this podcast. I intentionally charted the threes that the Thunder hit for this reason. Just to say, I've watched them all. A lot of them are contested. Now, a lot of them are open. So that's part of the fun. Like, the Hawks were not good defensively. I've said that already twice. I'll say it again many more times on this podcast. The Hawks were not good defensively in this game. But again, I've watched them all. A lot of them were contested, and they made them. And the Thunder are really good. They have a lot of talented players. They're not an elite shooting team. They're a pretty good shooting team, but not an elite one. And here's a fun stat for you. So just to get ahead of this, I've already seen this on social media, and it happens a lot. So I understand the reaction because the Hawks have had a lot of games this year in which the opponent has had a lot of threes, and they've made a lot of threes. And that prompts people to say, look, it's not luck at this point in time. And I'm not saying it's all luck. I never have said that, but there is always some shooting luck involved. It's a variance game. It's a make or miss league is kind of the way that it's phrased around the league. And one of the responses I got today was basically like, it's because they're wide open, is essentially was the response, which I understand. And some of them were, to be very fair. But A, all of them were not. And B, an important stat here. So coming into the night, NBA.com tracking data describes this. The Thunder came into the night shooting 38% on what the league describes as wide open threes. Wide open. Not just open, wide open. 38%. Good number, obviously. They shot 46% in this game, and in the competitive portion of this game, it was 50+%. Big difference there. So even if you, let's just say, even if you say, all right, they're all wide open, you would not expect the Thunder to shoot 50% on threes, or even 46%, which is what they shot in this game. How about this? 29 of the NBA's 30 teams are 41% or worse on wide open threes. So again, I do understand. I obviously want to contest them more than you don't, but to say that they were all wide open is wrong. And also, you would not expect them to make this many threes. So is that why the Hawks lost? No, it's part of the story for sure. The Thunder were really hot at times. In fact, in the first half, it was kind of a barrage from the Thunder. And then there was one in the third quarter as well. And I'll move on now. The Hawks broke down a lot in this game defensively. I watched a lot of this on the rewatch, even in real time. There were lots of breakdowns, especially the second unit. I think that was a theme in the pregame, actually, from Quinn Snyder. I actually asked about this pregame. It came up after the game as well. New guys and being integrated. And I know people tend to not think about this when it's not brand new anymore. And guys like Mann and LeVert and Niang are not brand new anymore. But it's only been like 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, plus the All-Star break. So even, week and a half, 2 weeks. And they break down a lot, and that's the thing. So, like, it's not all that. I thought, as we'll get into a lot more later on, the Capella-Niang duo had a disastrous defensive stretch, and it's because they don't have range and there's breakdowns. It's not one thing or the other. It's both. And the Hawks had some bad defensive moments in this game. But they did a good job not fouling. They did a pretty good job rebounding in this game. It was mostly just the threes. But just the threes is enough. So, long story short, there was some variance involved. The Hawks were also bad defensively, and it was a frustrating game on that end of the floor. Quickly here, the offense was okay, and again, not the problem to me, especially facing the Thunder's defense. The Hawks actually scored at a more efficient level than an average team does against Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City came into the night with a 105 defensive rating for the season, which is absurd, by the way. Hawks were about 110 in this game. So they scored enough to be competitive. They just didn't get enough done. The one issue that I will say one more time was the ball security. The Hawks had 19 turnovers in this game, and you could literally track it, as I probably will later on. When the Hawks were not turning the ball over, they had success in this game. The second quarter was their best quarter by far. They had 2 turnovers in the second quarter. That's not a coincidence. When they got shots to the rim, they were able to play pretty well in this game. When they were turning the ball over, that led to bad situations defensively, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not a huge surprise. The Thunder are awesome at creating turnovers, but when the Hawks were able to take care of the ball, they did okay. They actually shot the ball well in this game. The Hawks had 61% true shooting overall. They had 15 threes on their own, but it wasn't enough to kind of overcome the other issues. And again, this is a defense-first loss for the Hawks, to be very clear. You can't really expect to score at will against Oklahoma City on the whole. but they had 7 guys in double figures, 53 bench points. Like there was some strong offensive performances at times in this game. And again, I put a lot more of it on the defense, but in the end, not an incredible offensive game either, but they were just okay. And that's kind of where I would leave it for now. So one more time, big picture here, losing to the Thunder, not surprising. The expectations, not, at least for me, trying to be a realist, was not a win tonight. Was it winnable? Yes, of course. This is an NBA game. You can be anybody on any night. The Hawks have won games like this year against Cleveland, against Boston. Like you could have won. I'm not saying they couldn't have, but oftentimes I find like the outrage levels to be extremely tied to expectations, basically. And this is not the game that I would cause a scene, that I would throw things about. The Hawks had some rough moments that we'll talk about even more later on. The defense was, again, not good enough, which is frustrating. And there was some stuff that was preventable, as we'll talk about later on, that was frustrating. Some coaching stuff I didn't love in this game. But I don't find it enraging because, like, you're playing a team that's a title caliber team. The Thunder are really, really good, and the Hawks just aren't right now. They're not as good as the Thunder. They're a playing level team right now. That's where they are. I'm not telling you to be excited about that. That's just the reality, and I like to live in the reality when I can. All right, we'll get into more of what transpired in this game, plus some news on Kevon Harris in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So if you happen to actually miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter, etc., stay in the action with FanDuel. The live betting feature also keeps every moment of the game really exciting for you. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can also combine the live bets together into a same-game parlay. Plus, they have offerings like over-unders and point spreads, money lines, player props, and game props, and so much more. The FanDuel app is also safe. It's secure. They cover the entire range of sports. That includes the NFL and college football. They, of course, have the NBA, college basketball, WNBA, MLB, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, both foreign and domestic, plus F1, NASCAR, boxing, MMA, and so much more. Plus, the app is really easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now as well, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, get $150 in terms of dollars in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to join up right now today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, and if the Hawks would have won this game, I might have saved this to the end of the podcast, but in the meantime, I will pivot for a moment, talk about some news that happened on Friday. The Hawks agreed to a 10-day contract with Kevon Harris. So if you missed this, the Hawks waived Bones Hyland about 3 weeks ago, exactly 20 days ago, actually, and had an open roster spot as a result until the news broke today from Shams that they're going to sign Kevon Harris to a 10-day. By the way, Kevon Harris actually played tonight in College Park. So that's where he's already been all year long. It's not been officially announced yet. Again, he played tonight for the Skyhawks, but he's a talented guy from the Atlanta area, actually. 6'6" guard, was in camp with the Hawks in the preseason. Also has been in College Park all year long, averaging about 20 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists per game with College Park. And as I said a couple times the last 2 weeks, like there were options with this open roster spot. One of them was to sign 10-day contract, and that happened with Kevon today. Obviously, the Hawks are familiar with him. He's been around all year long in Atlanta, talented guy. The Hawks would, by the way, I still think that Harris would be like behind everyone on the roster other than maybe Daquan Plowden. Plowden, by the way, is more of like a role player, small role guy. And Harris is much more creative and talented on the ball offensively. That's the gap there between those two guys. But Harris is a real NBA quality player, not one that I'm saying the Hawks are going to have to play right away. Like the Hawks don't really have a spot where like you're going to obviously put him in the lineup right now, barring more injuries. But you still have a roster spot available. Why not take a look at him? Obviously, he's been around all year long. Key point here, if he signs on Saturday, his 10-day contract would cover 5 games. If he signs on Monday, it would cover 6 games. So I'm not sure what the Hawks' plan is there. All that Shams reported, all that was able to gather tonight at the arena, that the Hawks are going to they will be signing him. I just don't know exactly when and how that's going to be covered. One more note here. The deadline for signing guys to 2-way contracts is March 4th. So literally this coming week. And this 10-day goes past that. So if the Hawks were to convert someone like Don Barlow or Keaton Wallace later on, they cannot sign a 2-way contract to replace those guys. That's notable to me. So anyway, keep that in mind for the future. I do like Kevon. He is, again, a real, like, fringy for sure, but a real quality NBA guy. He's 27, not exactly a high upside play, but he is a 2-way contract kind of level guy or better. It would not be weird at all if he was in the NBA. So that's what you see in there. Is the impact huge? Probably not, but it's a 10-day contract. The investment level is very small. If you don't know this, by the way, at the end of the 10-day, you can sign another one, but you can't do more than 2 in a row with the same player. So basically, it could be as many as 20 days back-to-back, and then they have to decide rest of the season or whatever. But anyway, a nice reward for Kevon Harris, some NBA money for a few days, and we'll see if there's anything else beyond that. All right, back to the game itself. I mentioned before, the Hawks had a pretty bad start in this game that kind of plagued them. Again, Quinn said that after the game. I noted it post-game, even during the game. It was 15-4 by the first time out. And that's a bad sign against Oklahoma City. It was already, again, better than you in some respects. Turnovers early on, 3 of them at the beginning. They couldn't really afford those. They also, they went to Niang earlier than they usually do because the offense was just not working with Mo Gay. Actually, in the second half, Mo Gay did not play at all until garbage time. They definitely kind of pulled the plug on that experiment, at least for this game. And I asked about that post game. Quinn didn't really give me a huge answer on that, but kind of just said like it wasn't working, which is true in some respects. They usually kind of bring him in with LeVert mid-quarter. I'm talking about Niang now, but he didn't sit for very long. The Hawks also rushed to get Capella in against Hartenstein, which made sense to me versus Chet Holmgren, but still nothing a great matchup-wise for Capella in this game. And the Thunder were also red hot, which I've said before, but I'll say it again. They were red hot in this game. And the Hawks shot them at 17 points at the end of the first quarter. And again, the same numbers I gave you before were microcosmed in that first quarter. They allowed 7 threes, and they turned the ball over 7 times in the first quarter. And in a non-coincidental thing, they're done by 17 points. That explained a lot of what happened in the first quarter. The Hawks did find their footing in the second. I said before, they didn't turn the ball over a lot in the second quarter. That helped. The Thunder were hot for a while, but they actually missed some shots in the middle of the second quarter, and the Hawks had a 14-0 run late in the first half that featured back-to-back three-point plays by Kongwu, then a 3 by LeVert, etc. The shooting evened out a little bit, and again, protected the ball really well in that quarter on the way to 41 points in a quarter against Oklahoma City. That's actually very impressive from the Hawks. Kongwu was really good in the first half. I thought Trey had 9 assists. The ball was moving. They played pretty well. They got back into the game impressively. Then in the second half, 2 notes that were interesting and kind of notable here. I said before once already, but they started Niang over Gay in the third quarter, and then Chet Holmgren, the third best player, second best player for the Thunder, was ruled out at halftime. So like that was a notable kind of change that kind of changed the Thunder rotations a little bit, etc. They also brought man in for Niang pretty early in the third quarter and went smaller, generally speaking. But I said this before, but I don't like that the Hawks played Capella and Niang together in this matchup. If you heard the podcast on Wednesday, you will note that I said this a lot in that matchup. They got beat up defensively with that Capella Niang group. They're very slow. And it's not always about foot speed. Niang, by the way, individually, I think is an underrated defender because he looks so slow. That's just kind of the reality of his body type, the way he moves, etc. He's not a good defender, to be very clear, but he's not as bad as people think that he is just by sight on him. But the combination of him and Capella did not work in this game, to say the least. They played 8 minutes together, 8 minutes. Now, obviously, that's a small sample size, but they allowed 1.7 points per possession with Niang and Capella on the court together. 1.7. That's a 170 offensive rating. That's very, 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 very bad. Obviously, it's 8 minutes. When they were separated, the results were better. Like Capella's defensive numbers got better in the 2.5 minutes, basically, without Niang in this game. Niang by himself, along with Niang and Okongwu, basically, they were better. But the combination of those 2 guys together did not work. And Capella, by the way, just was not good in this game. Was bad, like flat out bad. And bad matchup for him for sure. But that was definitely painful. And anyway, long story short, the middle of the third quarter is where this game actually came to an end. So the Hawks did a pretty good job in the first half getting back into the game. They were still in the game mid-third quarter, but then there was a 17-0 run by the Thunder. And again, a lot of that was just a shooting barrage by Oklahoma City on, yes, some good looks, but they also made them all. There's nuance there. They hit 9 threes in a 10-minute period. You're in trouble when that happens, obviously. Also, though, similar to Wednesday, again, if you listen to that show, I'm repeating it a little bit, but there was a stretch on Wednesday when the Hawks had the lead. It's not necessarily the lead, but had the game get away from them in the second half, where, yes, defensively they were struggling, but they also had a bunch of open looks that didn't make in that stretch. Tonight was the exact same thing. Defensively, they were lighting it on fire. It was bad, but they also had a stretch of 8 consecutive empty possessions. You can't have that happen. So it was bad on one end, and then offensively, it wasn't helping in that moment in time. When that was over, the game was basically over. Now, it wasn't over because the Hawks did, again, as they kind of always seem to, they did respond a little bit. In fact, they cut the lead from, they were down by 27 at one point. They got it all the way down to 11 by the middle of the fourth quarter. Now, obviously, you're still up a big underdog at that point in time, but you're alive in the game. They sped the tempo up, took care of the ball, they made some shots, etc. But down 11, you got to be perfect still, basically. And there was a timeout with like 5 minutes to go. Hawks had the ball down 11. They threw the inbounds pass away for a layup. Can't have that happen at that moment in time. Then they had 2 offensive fouls in the next 3 possessions. So 3 out of 4 possessions, they had a bad turnover, offensive foul, offensive foul. So if there was life, it kind of ended there. And garbage time at the end. The Hawks actually pulled their starter with 2 minutes to go. We saw Keaton Wallace for the first time in 3 weeks at the end of this game, as well as Don Barlow for 2 minutes, and that was that. So again, it was lots of game flow things here. There were some highs. The Hawks had really good stretches in this game, second quarter, even fourth quarter, but the lows were so low that it kind of dug holes. And again, the 3 lows in this game were the start of the game, which by the way was not the bench, it was starters. Start of the game, then they had a lull late in the first quarter, and then they had their real bad lull at the end of the third. And that was the 3 stretches, and you can't have that against a team as good as Oklahoma City is, and we'll leave it there for now. All right, more to come here on the player-by-player evaluations in just one moment. All right, and if you're new to the podcast, what we do at the end of these game breakdown episodes is talk about the individual players and how they performed in this game. 9 guys played real minutes. There were 11 that actually saw the court. Don Barlow and Keaton Wallace played garbage time only. Not really much to add there. Keaton made a 3, and I also got to face his brother for the second time in his career. As Kaysen, his brother's on the Thunder, which was a nice little moment there at the end of the game. But beyond that, I thought the Hawks' worst player today was Clint Capella. Clint was bad. 11 minutes. Minus 13, 4 rebounds, but was 0-2 from the floor, a couple of bad misses around the rim, had a turnover. It was a very, very bad Clint Capella game. Now, it becomes Clint's always this bad. No, he's not. He's not always this bad. That's silly. But he has struggled mightily now in back-to-back games. I thought he was actually quite good against Detroit about a week ago. I guess 5 days ago now as I'm recording this podcast. So it hasn't been all bad since he returned, but he's not playing well. And also, if you want to be charitable, I think it's also accurate. This is a terrible matchup for Capella. The Thunder are fast, athletic. He's not anymore. But at the same time, he was really rough in this game. Defensively, he generally knows where to be, but he was not active enough. And also his lack of mobility cost them. And offensively, it was the Capella experience at this point. To be very clear, he's a pretty bad offensive player on the whole. And look, he's a backup center. At this point, he's a backup center. If you judge him by that standard, it's different than when he's playing 30 minutes a game. He's no longer doing that. So that does matter. That distinction does matter. But he was really rough in this game, and there's no way around that. So I don't know what you do moving forward. Again, there are matches where he's more effective or probably would be a lot more useful than tonight. But like in the second half, I was wondering if they might just go away from him entirely. And they didn't, but they probably should have, honestly. So there's that. Elsewhere, I mentioned before, Niang with Capella was a disaster. Niang alone was a little bit better. 14 points in the game on 12 shots. Not like he was a great offensive player, but did make 3 threes, 2 assists, 4 rebounds. I thought Niang was okay-ish, but was not fantastic. It's a bad matchup for him too. Like, same principles apply. Niang being a below-average athlete, to be kind, against a team like Oklahoma City is not great, and that was showing through in this one. Terrence Mann, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. He actually was a game worst, minus 17. Not all his fault, but I will say, Mann had some nice highs in this game, some good moments offensively, made some shots, good energy, but he does break down a lot right now. I don't know if it's because of the newness of it all or what, but he's having a lot of like mental mistakes, lots of defensive blunders, like taking a step the wrong way or whatever. I'm not worried about his defense overall moving forward, but in his stint so far with the Hawks, it's been a little bit up and down, let's just say. And that's been costly at times. Karis LeVert actually had a season high in scoring, 23 points for him off the bench, 2 steals, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. He was 6 of 7 on twos, 3 of 9 from 3. he played well. I don't think he was incredible, but he definitely put the ball in the basket in effective ways and was solid enough. Still, kind of not quite as glaring to me as with Man, but some breakdowns from him as well defensively, but nothing crazy. I thought he was fine. To the starters, Mo Gay was the other contender for choppiest player, I would say. He was minus 14 in 10 minutes. So there was a lot of attention paid to Capella's minus 13, and I get that. Gay was actually worse as far as the scoreboard was concerned on a permanent basis. He was better than Capella, to be fair, but the offense is not working with Gay. I think they know that, and I think maybe we saw a changing of the guard at halftime. Not for sure, but I think it would not surprise me at all if we saw Niang start on Monday. Now, I don't think starting lineups are that important compared to everybody else, but we saw basically they pulled the plug on Mo Gay in the second half in general. So I don't know if it's going to be maybe they go to Don Barlow, maybe they go away from Capella a little bit. I think, by the way, looking ahead, the Hawks have a back-to-back Monday and Tuesday. I would, if I was the Hawks, plan to not play Clint on a back-to-back because why would you? There's just physical wise, etc. You have Dom, you have Mo. Why don't you plan on that kind of thing? But we'll see how that goes in the future. But I thought Mo had some high highs. He had 2 blocks. He had a dunk. The highs were high, but he's still very clunky and some mistakes for sure. The other 4 guys were all decent enough. I should say Ricochet had some nice moments in this game. 9 rebounds for Zach, 2 assists, 12 points. He also, though, had 7 turnovers. And look, that's a lot for anyone. But I will say this. It's crazy. And I will hat tip this to my friend Kevin Chenard of Hawks.com. But I've been referencing as well. Ricochet has been incredible at taking care of the ball recently until tonight. In fact, this is the last day of February as I'm recording this podcast. Coming into the night, he had 6 turnovers in the month of February. 6. Tonight, he had 7. And 6 of them were the first 2.5 quarters. So it was wild. The split there was wild. And look, it's a tough one for him. It's nice. I would say it's a good learning experience for Ricochet, playing against a tough, physical, athletic, scary defense. And he had some bad moments in this game, making a little bit of errant passes, ball handling issues. I thought he fought through it well and played better as the game went along. But it was a nice learning experience, I would say, for the young guy in this game. Dyson Daniels, 10 points, 3 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks for Dyson. I think defensively he was pretty good in this game. He didn't foul very much against Shea. Shea got his, as Shea always is going to, but I thought Dyson was pretty good. Was not the problem at all. He was minus 7. In fact, when the Hawks their 3 best players right now are Trey, Dyson, and Okongwu. And when they were playing, the Hawks were very competitive in this game. Dyson minus 7, Trey minus 4, Onyeka minus 2. They were right there. That's actually somewhat encouraging to me, I would say, if I was a Hawks fan. Speaking of Onyeka, he was very good in this game. 23 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists. Onyeka is he had a very, very good month of February. And I think it went underreported. And I do know that there's a faction of Hawks fans who just cannot accept Okongwu at center because of his height. I find that very silly, but it just is never going to stop. I covered Al Horford. It was the same thing for him, and Al Horford's probably a Hall of Famer. So it is what it is. But in the meantime, Okongwu in February did the following. 15.3 points per game on 63% shooting. Elite stuff there. 9.6 rebounds per game, 3.2 assists per game, 1.4 turnovers, which is really good, and 1.7 stocks per game. Again, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, super efficient. That was a month. It's 15 games worth or 12 games, whatever it is. That was a good month for Okongwu. He was very good in the last couple of weeks. He was good in this game, 23 and 11, very solid and encouraging to me that he is playing this well for the Hawks. And then lastly, Trae Young, 19 points, 12 assists, 3 steals, 3 rebounds. Not the best Trae game, but the passing was there, as it almost always is. Turnovers were pretty low for him, only 3. It's actually kind of funny. You would assume, based on just the way the Hawks play, that when they have a super high turnover game, it would have been because of Trae. It wasn't. It was Ricochet had 7, which is probably a big part of the reason there. But Trae only had 3. He didn't shoot the ball well, though. 3 of 9 on 2s, 2 of 5 from 3, and 7 of 7 from the free throw line. So 19 points on 17 shots. Not terrible efficiency, but the passing was there. He was just okay. but nothing special for Trey in this one. But again, when the Hawks had their guys on the court, Trey, Dyson, Onyeka, they were pretty good. Everybody else, less so. All right, let's get out of here. But the Hawks do play again on Monday. They had the weekend, quote unquote, off. They will be traveling on Sunday. They'll probably have a practice tomorrow. We'll see. But they play the Grizzlies on the road on Monday. That's a tough game. Obviously, not as tough as the one tonight because the Grizzlies are not quite as good as the Thunder, but the Grizzlies are very good. They're 38-21 this season, and that game is going to be on the road. The Hawks have a slight rest advantage because the Grizzlies play Saturday night, but nothing crazy there. They have to go on the road for that game. So the Hawks are underdogs, I'm sure, in that contest, but we'll see how that one goes. And then after that, they come home for their longest homestand of the season. They play the next 6 games in a row at home after the game on Monday in Memphis. But we'll talk about that all next week. Please stay tuned to the podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast. I don't know when the next show will be. At the very latest, it will be after the game on Monday. Might have one on Sunday night. We'll see how that goes. My schedule is a little bit iffy, but at the same time, stay tuned. Please subscribe. That's the best way to find the podcast, to have the podcast subscribed so that it will pop up when we have a new episode. Check us out on Apple. Check us out on Spotify. We're also on YouTube. Again, one more time, please like this episode and tell your friends about the podcast, comment, etc. I appreciate everyone following the show as well on social media. We are on X/Twitter at LockedOnHawks. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. You can also follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. Hopefully you enjoy your weekend. Take a deep breath after this one. I'm sure it was frustrating for a lot of people last couple games for the Hawks, but more to come. And I still think it's not going that badly on the whole for the Hawks. There's some stuff to be encouraged by. Young guys building for the future. And we'll get into all that and more next week. But anyway, enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you all next time.